Hello everyone, it's Thomas coming to you to talk about tanks. Father Fish wanted me to mention that there's 3 different types of tanks you'll typically encounter. Atriums, which are used for plants, terrariums, which are used for lizards and snakes, and aquariums, which are used for fish. When you're selecting your aquarium, there's a few things you want to keep in mind, like what you're going to be putting in it, because things like turtles require some airspace at the top and a large filter, and things that jump, you're going to have a tight lid for the fish tank so they can't escape. And you also want to make sure you have space for your fish tank. You obviously can't fit a 5,000 gallon on your headboard. From there, you will typically find glass tanks for sale used. You might come across acrylic tanks, but glass is a lot easier to rehab, and most places sell used glass tanks around $1 a gallon. So if you're looking for a cheap way to get started, either look there or look at your local messaging boards or on Facebook or Craigslist. There's typically really cost-effective units available. Alrighty. So the first step in setting up your brand new fish tank is probably going to be getting that fish tank. For a lot of people, the biggest thing that's going to slow you down is the price of a fish tank. So maybe that's the first thing you should do, is figure out what you can afford. Used tanks are a great way to go, and often by looking on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace or other local listing sites, you'll be able to find some of the absolute best deals on fish tanks possible. This here is a used fish tank that was brought into us, and if you notice, it has a lot of scale on it. All of this can actually be cleaned right off with a razor blade. A little bit of tender loving care, it'll be no problem. Now this one's stained a little bit too, so if you see stuff like that in your fish tank, that's a little bit harder to get rid of, but if you're okay with it, I don't think your fish will mind it too much. So after you've selected your tank, the first thing you're going to do is bring it home, preferably outside. Find a flat surface, and you're going to set your tank on it, fill it completely up with water, and leave it for 24 hours. Now the whole point of this is to make sure it doesn't leak, because the last thing you'd want is to fill up your fish tank and have it leak all over your floor. So assuming that your fish tank holds water and doesn't leak, you'll be good to go. But if the fish tank is leaking, it's going to take a little bit more effort. What you're going to have to do is get a razor blade. You're going to have to cut all of the silicone out. And we'll go into that in another video. But after removing all of it, you're going to go get some silicone 2, and you're going to add that silicone back in where the seams were. Press it in, do the best job you can, just get it in there deep. Test it again. Keep doing that until your fish tank holds water. Now once you've achieved this and your fish tank continues to hold water without a problem, that's going to go into the next steps. That's where you're going to put your tank in your house. So go into your house, find a good spot for your tank. Now obviously, it'd be wonderful to have a 500 gallon in your bedroom, but most people don't have space for that. So that's why you see a lot of smaller tanks. So find something appropriate for the space you have. Now after you've done that, the next thing you're going to need to do is figure out what kind of water you're going to use. So when you're using water, obviously all water is different. If you have well water, if you have a pond on your property, if you have a lake on your property, you can go ahead and use that stuff without any treatment or any hassle. Just go ahead and put it right in your fish tank. Now if you're on city water, that makes a little bit of a problem, because most city water has chlorine in it, and fish don't really like chlorine. Now we sell this stuff, it's called sodium thiosulfate. By adding this to your water, it can actually remove the chlorine and chloramine from your water, rendering it safe for fish. Now, the last kind of water you'd be getting is purchased water, and that's like drinking water. So you can go to the store and get water, but make sure it is drinking water. Don't use distilled water, don't use RO water, and don't use spring water. You want to use drinking water. Once you have your water ready to go, the next thing you're going to do is get your substrate ready. I moved over here so we could have a better example of what a deep substrate tank looks like. Obviously this is a very large tank, and it has a lot of substrate in it. I'm going to hold my hand next to it so you get an idea of how much substrate's actually here. So what you're going to do is go get about an inch worth of soil. This can be from your yard if it's clean and there's no pesticides in it. It can be from any place where there's dirt as long as it's clean. Or you can go to the store and get potting soil. Whatever works easiest for you. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take that potting soil and add a small amount of water to it. Not enough to make it soup. You're going for mud pies. You really want it to be a congealed patty of mud. Now, if you've added too much water to it, that's fine. Just take your little fish net, scoop out the mud, let the water run out, and put those little mud pies in a different container. Let them sit overnight. The next morning, you can put that in the bottom of your tank. Now, after those mud pies have sat in the tank and they're ready to go, you're going to get 2 inches of sand. And you're going to ask me what kind of sand. The answer is literally any kind of sand. As long as it's not gravel, it'll work. Now, coarse sand, like blasting media, is what we use here because the thin stuff tends to stay in the water column more, but it really doesn't matter. As long as you're not using gravel and you're using sand, it will go much easier for you. Now, if you notice the top of your sand is dirty, don't clean that. That means you don't have enough sand. You're going to leave that. I want you to leave your tank dirty. The only acceptable part of a tank to clean is the front glass, and the only reason that it's acceptable is so you can see your fish. All of that algae is pulling nutrients out of the water, and it's encouraging the bioload in the aquarium. I also wanted to mention that certain creatures prefer certain substrates. There's really not much that's going to like gravel, but as you can see in this video right here, my turtle's sitting on a very porous and coarse lava rock. There's a lot of animals that like to burrow in the substrate, and rocks like that can be really damaging to their soft skins and their barbules. So you want to stick to coarse things for things like turtles or animals that can handle it. Make sure you're not putting really rough stuff in with your soft catfish and loaches. Alright, so now that you've added sand to your tank, the next step is to add your water. Now, because of the way we made this aquarium, there's 2 layers. You're going to have dirt down here, you're going to have sand up here. This will be dry. So if you just pour water right in, you're actually going to punch through that sand, and you're going to force all of that soil into the water. If that happens to you, you're probably going to have to drain the entire tank, add 2 inches of sand, and restart the whole process. So what I recommend is to make sure you have a towel or a large sponge or a plate and set that right in the center of the sand and pour your water on top of that so that you don't punch through the sand and you can fill the tank without disturbing your substrate. Now once you have your tank filled with water, we're going to move on to what things you need to maintain the aquarium. First thing you're going to need is a sponge filter. So this right here is one of the smallest sizes of sponge filters we sell. This is more than big enough for your 10-gallon aquarium, and they're pretty simple. The top of a sponge filter has a little knob that you hook your air line into. So this sponge filter sits down in your aquarium. You hook it to your pump via air line. Air goes down in here, water comes up through here, and that filters your tank. So those are pretty simple to use. There is other filters out there. However, I cannot recommend any of them other than the sponge filter. These last a long time without any maintenance. They're low power, they're quiet, and they're really, really cheap. This sponge filter right here retails for $10, and that will last you years. The next thing you need for your aquarium is probably going to be a heater. Now we recommend about 50 watts per 10 gallons, and this is a 150 watt heater. You really don't need one this big, but it's the one I had laying around. The only thing you want to make sure when you purchase a heater is that it's adjustable, because you're going to set it to 82.5. That temperature is really good for your fish, and it's going to help to kill bacterial infections and things like ick and other parasites. The last thing you want to focus on with your tank is lighting. They say you need about 2 watts per gallon of lighting. If you're using LEDs, that's a little harder to figure out. So a general rule of thumb is if the entire bottom of your aquarium is well lit, it's probably well lit enough to grow plants. It's interesting because this tank is actually much better lit than this one is. Because of all of the things in the water, it appears much darker. So that's the only other reason you might need a brighter light, is if you're trying to pierce through some darker acidic waters. Alrighty you guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you had a great day. The Bashir is telling you to press the like button and subscribe.